Welcome back, Screamers, to what is our end of the year show. So Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, everyone. Yeah. And boy, do we have some gifts for you. We have some gifts for you. Because today on Why Does the Wilhelm Scream, we'll be talking about our favorite films of 2022, kind of an anti-list, right? So you'll get a total of 10 favorites, right? 5 from each of us that we hope you'll seek out and watch. We're also going to talk about our gift exchange movies. Those are the films that we gifted each other, a film that we thought the other hadn't seen but should. But before any of that, Jason's gift to all of you who are listening is a review of the new film Mindcage, starring Martin Lawrence and John Malkovich. All right, Jason, why did you want to talk about this one?
I mean, whenever you get 2 huge Hollywood heavyweights, I mean, clearly James Lipton inside the actor's studio type people together in a film like this, I think whenever you see Martin Lawrence, this is a dream pairing, right? This is the pairing that we've all been waiting to see since the first time, since we've been in short pants, right? We were, and we heard our grandfathers talk about movies. You have dream pairings, right? And Lawrence Malkovich is clearly one of those ones, I think, that people said, people talked about it and they were like, that's never going to happen. And there were movies, they were like, oh, what great, novel or what great cinematic work could we put these 2 giants together in, and you couldn't fathom it. But one, because what would the budget be, right? I mean, like what would the box office take have to be? I mean, and of course, then you're not even really worried about that because the box office will be there. You put Lawrence and Malkovich in a movie, for a fact that is, that's going to rule the box office for at least 6 months straight. People are going to see it over and over again. They're going to get tattoos. They're going to name children after it. It's going to be fucking huge. And so I couldn't believe it happened. And I couldn't believe they went straight to streaming, of course. And, maybe their stars have diminished a little bit over time. But man, I mean, I think one, and then couple all of that with them being in a movie called Mindcage. 8 characters, that's it. But it says so much and so little at the same time, which is a weird thing to have happen. But I mean, who's in the cage? Whose mind are we talking about?
What is the cage?
Right, exactly. I'm minding a cage. I mean, like, I don't even know. Is it a brain? Am I tending the cage? So
is it a metaphor?
There's so much going on, and just not even having seen the film, there's so much going on. And I think that's really kind of what drew me to it. Honestly, I think I'd heard about this a few months back. And I guess I just seen something that they were going to be in a movie together. And I thought, that's bonkers. I mean, that's crazy talk. Because is Malkovich in that point of his career, getting somewhat serious at this point? Has he been in that point of his career where he's now doing beach home or tax shelter movies at this, because I understand why Martin Lawrence is doing it, because I do think he's in beach home tax shelter movies at this point. I mean, he had the last huge pre-COVID hit, which was Bad Boys 3. But that was going to be basically, his swan song. There's not going to be a Bad Boys 4. Unless it's Bad Boys 4, we're definitely too old for this shit. That's the title of the movie.
Malkovich has been in the film Ava, which was a Jessica Chastain vehicle, but also like Colin Farrell. Weirdly, a good cast. Not a great film, but yeah, Malkovich, Jessica Chastain, Common, Gina Davis, Colin Farrell. Malkovich was also in a small film called Arkansas, which wasn't.
Yeah, that was that Clark terrible. That was I didn't actually see it. But.
Yeah, Vince Vaughn, Liam Hemsworth. So, yeah. But I think yes, I think Malkovich really is.
He was in Space Force, right? He was in that Netflix series Space Force with Steve Carell, which season 1 was actually pretty funny. I didn't make it through season 2 because it got to be pretty bad, but. and I knew that they weren't going to continue it. So what was the point of actually continue watching it?
He was in White Elephant with one of those bad, like Bruce Willis later career. Yeah. So
right. And so maybe he is. Maybe that's the stage that he's in where he's lost all sorts of, lost any sort of care. But I didn't think he was in the Willis and Cage period where he was just basically picking up paychecks and would do essentially anything. Now, to be fair, like I didn't know anything about the director or anything else. I just knew it was Martin Lawrence and John Malkovich, and that right there alone told me that I had to watch it.
Which does seem like a draw, though. I mean, it does seem like something that I would go, you know what, I'll give that some time just to see what happens here.
If this was 1995, you would really truly be interested in this because it would be some sort of weird buddy cop, like Nothing to Lose, or one of those like Tim Robbins, something along those lines of like where you throw Steve Zahn in the making. Which actually Steve Zahn didn't he do was that Blue Streak that he did with Martin Lawrence? I know Steve Zahn was in one of those. So, but yeah, this seems like a crazy, wacky pairing. Obviously, that would fit that kind of stupid movie mold that people were doing, in that time frame. Not that they're not doing it now, but yeah, no. I mean, of course, it's one, and I like to subject you to movies that I know for fucking sure you'd never. This is true.
Yeah, I get this text. We have to talk about Mindcage. I'm like, fuck me. All right.
Now it's every single week. It's although I blame you for Falling for Christmas, but Mindcage is my fault.
No, that's totally my fault. Yeah.
That's my revenge for Falling for Christmas.
Okay. So Malkovich is in his sort of, beach house kind of tax bill phase of his career. And Lindsay Lohan is in her Christmas movie phase of her career. So that seems, right. I was kind of interested to see what Martin Lawrence did sort of paired next to Malkovich, but also then how big was Malkovich going to go? Because you knew he was going to go huge, like Teddy KGB huge in this film. And even that was just really kind of disappointing.
Yeah. Do you want to give a rundown? You want me to give a rundown?
No, you give a rundown. You do that.
All right. So the plot, and I'll see how I do, because this movie, I will be totally honest. This movie lulled me to sleep. The good middle 45 minutes where I was watching, but I don't know if I was paying too close of attention to it. So our story starts off with Martin Lawrence, who's Jake Doyle. He's a police detective. A few years back, he had solved a huge serial killer case where the killer was called the Artist. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all of that because the movie and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like that whole aspect of the movie, like completely baffled me. Why Malkovich is, dressed up his people, dressed up his victims. Like I know, okay, I'm jumping ahead. So we'll get into that about of the inconsistencies of the movie. So fast forward 5 years later, Malkovich, who was the Artist, is in jail. Martin Lawrence has a young, fresh out of college, I guess she just became a detective. I couldn't figure out her timeline because like she talked about how like 5 years ago she didn't know about the Artist, and when they talked about that as if it was just 5 years ago, this would have been a big huge case that everyone would have known about. This would have been something that would have made the news, that as she would have studied this in her criminology courses, they would have talked about it.
Doesn't she have like a master's in psychology or something?
Right. But she has no, and then she vaguely remembers. When they bring it up, she vaguely remembers. So they get assigned a case, and lo and behold, it is a copycat of the Artist. It's got to be a copycat because the Artist, John Malkovich, is in jail. Now, in the opening scenes, you see Martin Lawrence holding a lot of coffee cups. He never actually drinks coffee. He does drink a coffee actually when he gets back to the station, but he just stands there like his arm is paralyzed and just holds coffee. It cracked me up. I just was like, I put in my notes, has Martin Lawrence ever had a cup of coffee? Has he ever held a coffee cup before? Because, like,
it's like
Floyd
when
Grimes has
somebody
been in a lot
is
of
like
movies.
smoking in a film and you know that they've never actually held a cigarette before. They've never smoked before. But
So this movie, as soon as we figure out this is a copycat, the Mary Kelly, who's played by an actress named Melissa Roxburgh, who I wrote down as Radha Mitchell, but not Radha Mitchell. And as far as the actress goes, she has Radha Mitchell's eyebrows. That's basically what she's got. So this dives headfirst into Silence of the Lambs territory. Radha Mitchell goes to the artist to help.
you're just going to call her Radha Mitchell the whole time.
Yes. Not Radha Mitchell goes to the artist. And they're trying to convince the artist to help them out to figure out who this copycat person is. Throughout and a couple of other caveats to this, the artist is on death row. And he is about to be put to be put to death in about 2 weeks. We also find out that when Martin Lawrence's character, when him and his partner captured the artist the first time, they got into a head-on collision with the artist, and inexplicably Martin Lawrence's partner got out of the wreck and then lit himself on fire, so killed himself. So we go through all of this. There's a whole slew of like nonsensical other kind of red herring plots. Mary Kelly, Radha Mitchell, Melissa Roxburgh. No offense to Melissa Roxburgh, she's fine in this.
Whatever her name is.
Right. I hope she has a great career. I hope her and Lindsay Lohan make Falling for Christmas too. I hope that happens.
That sounds promising.
Which
they might have more chemistry than she and Martin Lawrence did.
I also was thinking, like, how did I not mention or like at least come up with that Hanukkah in Handcuffs is the perfect sequel to Holiday in Handcuffs?
Oh, you're right.
That is like we need, if there's something that Why Does the Wilhelm Scream eventually does, we should do a Kickstarter to fund Hanukkah in Handcuffs.
We should
just for our Jewish listeners out there.
Yeah, we should produce it.
Absolutely. I think we have the know-how and
yes, of course. At least the opinions to tell people what to do.
Right. Well, and we know of all the movies that are set during the holiday period that involve handcuffs. You and I have, probably we've seen them all for sure, and
yes, I think
our opinions are probably more important and better than most.
Oh, for sure.
Getting back to Mindcage, there's a bunch of little side plots. Martin Lawrence is, for whatever reason, still stuck on. I mean, obviously the case has affected him because his partner has died. He still carries the weight of that with him 5 years later. He has been studying different types of religion and psychic phenomenon. You see him at the beginning of the movie watching some sort of YouTube video that is very like intense and talking about this angel, this fallen angel. And then the voiceover on the video is like, you'd know him better as Lucifer. And then it cuts off to something else. That's like the first 5 minutes of the movie. So this movie is fucking intense, man. It brings it. This is a Thomas Harris, like just fucking in your face. Like it's just going to be 7 is fucking Silence of the Lambs and has 8mm and something else as its twin baby. I can pull another ridiculous stuff. That's this movie, man. Saw 8mm and Saw as its twin kids. So you see Martin Lawrence investigating a lot of different psychic and religious studies. For some reason, Melissa Mary Kelly she has a lot of travel to Rome pamphlets scattered around her apartment and in her, like on her person. And so those come into play. Evidently, she's married to a father figure / ex-priest or ex-religious leader of her, that was in her life that helped her out. And now they're married, and it's this weird, bizarre thing. But this dives very quickly into Silence of the Lambs territory, where Detective Mary Kelly goes to the prison to see John Malkovich and to entice him to help out with the case and to figure out where this copycat murderer is happening. Now, all the while, additional murders are happening. He's targeting sex workers like the original artist did, but he also starts targeting public figures. And so he kidnaps the lieutenant governor. And in order, and basically all of that is so the copycat killer kidnaps the lieutenant governor, and all of that is in order for John Malkovich's sentence to be commuted, so he can go be in life in prison and not be on death row anymore. Like I said, the middle 45 minutes, there's just a lot of convoluted stuff. They go and they see a coroner. All of it is it's all just so preposterous because the people that die, there's a whole bunch of like plot points that should mean something that don't actually mean anything. Because again, if you look back at this with any sort of like, and I suggest that you don't. If you watch this, don't go back and try to.
There's no reason to. It's okay. Right? Don't look at watching.
But like one of the bodies dies, and it's so when the artist kills, he dresses them up in these kind of gothic religious outfits and mimicking statues and just different religious visages essentially. And one of them has these elaborate wings, wings on the body. When they're doing the coroner brings the body in, he clips the wings off, and for some reason there's blue fingernail polish hidden under one of the wings that Malkovich tips off the cops to. On another body, there's a compass, whatever you call a compass arm
needle.
That was Martin Lawrence's partner's compass needle, and the fingernail polish was a discontinued color that Mary Kelly had used when she was a teenager. So all of this was supposed to be pointing back to something. All the while we go back and forth back to John Malkovich's lair. All this leads up to this movie put me to sleep for a good 45 minutes. And and again, so like the first 15 to 30, I'm laughing because I'm like, oh man, this movie's got everything. It's got bad green screen. It's got oversaturated camera shots. It looks like it wants to be in the Saw movie. It's got a haunted detective who is popping pills. It's got a new young buck on the scene that's that is attractive, but not too attractive to be distracting. It's very Law and Order SVU, and like 88.
And
it's got millionaire serial killers that can do these elaborate, these elaborate set pieces for every murder that they do. And as a throwaway, about, I'm going to say 40 minutes into the movie, you see Martin Lawrence continue to go. So there's a couple of things that like really like you see Martin Lawrence go and see a woman who's essentially controlling another man with her mind, or what you think, and you think maybe it's a hoax, but she has essentially, she's taken him over and is making him writhe about on the ground, very kind of, spasmically and just kind of, it looks like a typical horror type movie that, the movements of The Exorcist. And then at one point, you're to believe that Martin Lawrence is kind of above it all. And as well as Mary Kelly, because she basically states that over and over again, that she has disdain for religion. She clearly comes off as an atheist. And so Martin Lawrence takes her to what seems to be some sort of like faith healer and asks him to pray for her. And she gets all upset and pissed off and they have a fight. Again, all of this is apropos of nothing really, and other than when you hit the big reveal. So again, 45 minutes, I'm laughing, 45 minutes, I'm sleeping. And the last 5 minutes, I'm like, holy shit, this is what this movie actually did. Because I was just like, so you see the copycat killer throughout the film, and he is always wearing a hoodie, all in black. He goes to a strip club at one point so he can kidnap a stripper. You see him at various points. And once Mary Kelly is finding the lieutenant governor, you see him there as well. And lo and behold, it turns out it is Martin Lawrence. And earlier in the film,
Martin Lawrence.
Not exactly Martin Lawrence. It's Martin Lawrence with a voiceover of John Malkovich, because John Malkovich is a very young boy. He had been pushed down by his mother and smacked the back of his head. And that had given him this is where I got lost, because I didn't know if that was what the triggering event was, or if he was gifted this by the angel, which was then causing him to like perform sacrifices or homages to to Lucifer. So Malkovich can go into this like state, this trance-like state. And since he's an artist, if he can draw them, then he can enter their bodies and control their bodies. So Malkovich this entire time has essentially started killing again so he could get his sentence commuted so he can live. He could essentially live. And he's been going outside of his body and living whatever life he wants to do by taking over these other bodies. And it ends up working for him. The sentence does get commuted. He reveals himself to Mary Kelly and what he's doing and what he's done, because when he takes over Martin Lawrence, Mary Kelly has to shoot him because Martin Lawrence, who's being controlled by John Malkovich, has a gun pointed on her. So he kills her, and it all seems like evil has won, and that John Malkovich has bested whatever city this is in, their police department, and then he can go on and live forever and live beyond the walls of the prison. But don't count him out yet. Mary Kelly has a trick up her sleeve still. She sends him art supplies that are laced with ricin, and because earlier in the film it shows that he has a tendency to chew on his pencils when he's making art. Which this film is not. Which is not what he was doing when he was acting in this movie. And yeah, he chews on the ricin, and that's the end of the movie. He dies, and Mary Kelly goes on, and then she decides that she will finally take that trip to Rome
with her ex-priest husband.
Right. Yeah. Man, this movie wanted so desperately to be like a metaphysical Silence of the Lambs. And I mean, obviously, that's not like the metaphysical part may be new, but I mean, clearly, when Silence of the Lambs wins 5 Oscars and makes tons of money, and I know Silence of the Lambs was 30 years ago at this point, but the copycats were going to, just like in Mindcage, the copycats are going to fucking Mindcage.
Yeah, I mean, it wanted to create another Hannibal Lecter, right? I mean, sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No. I mean, but at no point is it believable. I mean, everyone commits, I think. Malkovich probably could have gone harder. He could have gone a little bit more, but Martin Lawrence is woefully miscast in this. He can't carry that. He can't carry that gravitas of a serious role. This is very reminiscent of Chris Rock doing Spiral, the Saw spinoff, the Saw prequel series. And this felt much like that's what they were trying to do here, even though that's a weird thing to mimic because that was not successful at all. But yeah, I mean, look, by the time of the last 10 minutes, I was just like, okay, this is fucking stupid and ridiculous. I'm in. I'm back in. You pulled me back in, you sons of bitches. Because
I'm in with the huge ridiculous reveal. That's what hooks you.
But I'm also thinking, like, with a bigger budget, and you put it back in the 80s, if you replace Martin Lawrence with like Jean-Claude Van Damme, and you have Malkovich take on the bodies of like people who can fight him like over and over and over again, like this. Have you ever seen Fallen with Denzel Washington?
Yeah.
It's similar. It's similar to that, right? I mean, in the sense where the demon can pass through bodies, and they try to poison them at the end of the movie as well. Obviously, that is a much better movie than this is. But like, this is a fun thread to that you could go really big and crazy with. But obviously, they don't have the budget, and you've got Martin Lawrence, and
well, they didn't have. I mean, the writing was bad. The acting wasn't great. All of the little plot points that got brought up and dropped and sort of hidden and that later you realize should have meant something were never actually given sort of time on screen or the weight on screen to actually mean anything. So it's not just, I mean, you're right. With a bigger budget, this could have been, a cooler film, but the other structural stuff would have really had to be, I mean, that's what did it for me.
I can only imagine people listening to this and be like, what the fuck did they watch? Because none of the things that they've said in the past half hour actually makes sense whatsoever.
Makes sense. But that's how I felt watching it.
Well, I think
that makes perfect sense.
Right. I kept kind of like bouncing back occasionally to like, okay, what did I miss here? And all of it is so like nonsensical too. Like, again, I mean, there were so many things, like you said, that were thrown in that are just visual flares, that are just, they don't make any sense whatsoever. Malkovich's artistry really doesn't play into it at all, aside from the fact that he could draw. But again, why have that as a plot point? Why have this other than you need a way to kill him? But okay, you could have had, and again, you go back to Fallen, where Denzel Washington is willing to sacrifice himself and kill himself essentially to make sure that the demon no longer lives. That's a cool premise. You could have had Mary Kelly kill him in prison, like shoot him in prison. I mean, you don't need this ridiculous flair other than to give him some sort of like hyped up sense of serial killer, mysticism essentially. Right. And so all of that is like, you had budget to put together those set pieces, but really nothing came of them. And it wasn't like this movie was overly gory or there were any sort of like cool kill scenes or anything of, that nature. So it's bizarre that like almost everything that this movie does, I can see where someone was like, hey, on paper, on the back of a napkin, when you're sitting in a bar, Malkovich is a serial killer. Yeah, I've seen In the Line of Fire. That's pretty cool. Let's do that thing. And then, but that's all, I think that's all that he had. And they were like, all right, what do we have any scripts that are on the back burner that are just sitting there unproduced that we can like throw this into? Like maybe that'll work.
And this idea of sort of the flair, the visual flares, that's kind of all this movie had, was trying to be clever and thinking itself more clever than it actually was by half.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I did like to watch this with a group of bad cinema lovers would be fun. Obviously, just the green screen, like I said, the first half hour is really, really kind of laugh out loud funny. The green screen is ridiculously bad when they're driving, and it's the conversation between Lawrence and Kelly. It's so obvious. It's almost like Saturday Night Live level bad. That's how bad it is.
Yeah. Or some of those old films from the 40s, 50s, where it's clearly, like just a video projection on the back, and they're moving the steering wheel way too much for any kind of like actual driving. That's what it was like. It was so terrible, and it took itself way too seriously too. And that's
the other thing that I thought about this too, is that if you have Lawrence in this, like Lawrence is not going to have a late career dramatic. He's not going to go Bill Murray. He's not. I mean, like he's not going to Robin Williams even. Give him a Wayans brother-esque but smarter parody of these films. And that could have actually worked because you've got Malkovich who can play that for humor for sure. But yeah, they didn't do that either. And they're just naming it Mindcage, which is
it's so cheesy. Like, I mean, the metaphysical aspect of it, moving that into that philosophical realm of we keep ourselves in these cages. Our minds are our own sort of trappings. And it was that sophomore in college that took that one philosophy class who now like has big ideas.
So go seek it out. I don't even know it's streaming. Go seek it out. Mindcage with Martin Lawrence. And if any of what we just talked about sounded appealing at all,
or if you just want to waste a couple bucks in an afternoon and dive headfirst into this film just for fun. Enjoy yourselves.
Just for fun. It's a good way to end the year. Just for fun.
And get out of your own mind cage.
Yeah, exactly. Shuffle off your own mind cage and dive into Mindcage.
All right, should we do our 5 favorite films of the year?
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm curious before we start though, what kind of criteria did you develop to pick these films?
It was a 30-point analysis based on this. I have this
like a vehicle inspection,
right? Yes, yeah. I talk about. I looked at cinematography. I looked at the script writing. I looked at the time of day it was shot. There's a whole slew of things, and it's a very, very complex formula. But for the most part,
how many points did films lose for not having Martin Lawrence in a serious dramatic role?
Yeah, that's like the original sin, right? You kind of go in understanding that. I mean, basically, none of my films, unfortunately, had Martin Lawrence in them. But so they all kind of had that. They were all on that same sort of curve anyway, so it didn't really matter. But yeah, I will say that it's like one of those tests that you might take as a civil servant if you had been in the military. So you get 5 extra, 10 extra points. Yeah, if Martin Lawrence is in it, clearly it's going to take it up a notch. But I made my list before I watched Mindcage, so alas, Mindcage didn't quite make that list.
Oh, it suffers from recency bias then.
In all seriousness, every time I do like something like this at the end of the year, I'm always like reminded of like how much I hadn't seen. Like I get panicky oh shit, there's there's all kinds of good things that I've just like let slip in lieu of like putting together programming for the Real House the Real House Foundation at Home Film Fest weekly screenings and putting together the programming for the actual charity event. It's just I end up watching so much stuff that and then I end up like forgetting like I haven't seen Decision to Leave yet. I mean, like things like that. Not that I would have made my list necessarily, but I mean, there's just like there's good films coming out of every year. And alas, I could have seen Decision to Leave and not Tar. I could have watched that. I could have done the other thing, but sometimes you miss. Sometimes you take 100.
You miss every shot you don't take, or whatever. I don't know.
You don't. Right? Yeah. Whatever that is.
Yeah.
You watch 100% of the movies you see. I think is what we were trying to get to.
There were. I was reminded of how many films that I hadn't seen this year. How many films that I could have watched up until like we're sitting down to record this, but ultimately decided that I just had better things that I wanted to use my time for. It's
hard. Once it starts to feel like, and again, we watch a lot of things for the podcast. You guys are welcome. In addition to the things right, like Mindcage, in addition to the things that we're actually speaking on, so we can kind of use up anecdotes and things like that, and we're completists. But in all seriousness, my list is really what I had either the most fun watching or enjoyable watching. I didn't really go by intellectual elitism or sort of like art house flair or anything like that. I mean, like it's not. These are just films that I had that I really liked, and they're in no really particular order since I rallied against Sight and Sound last week.
Correct.
So I'm just going to go in with this is where I am.
This is the anti-list list, right? I mean, that's what this is. This is our kind of like high fidelity top 5.
I will say there's probably not a lot of surprises on my list. I'm not going to be able to pull. There's a handful of like independent. I mean, the indie films, but that I saw this year that I really liked, but none of them really made the list. Usually I try to like strive to see the underseen, but in this case, there's a handful, but not a ton that I saw. Okay. So I don't think this was a very strong year looking back for movies at all. Now there's a lot that I missed, but like overall, if I'm looking over, kind of just at 2022, the stuff that people really gravitated towards, I think was overblown a little bit. There was just a lot of mediocre, but there was good. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that there wasn't, but I don't think 2022 is going to go down as the year of like, summer of 85 or 99 or, any one of those incredibly stellar years. Yeah. And I think you can kind of see that with the Globes and everything else. It's not like there's nothing. I mean, I would imagine if we look at the Oscars in February, what's going to get nominated is what we think is going to get nominated. I mean, I think Tar is probably going to be the most celebrated film of the year. And then, we'll see how that goes. But unless like Babylon knocks the socks off people, which I haven't seen yet either. And I know The Whale just got released to theaters. I haven't seen that. So I figure you'll see the standards come up, but I figure Tar, maybe The Whale, maybe Babylon will be the ones that are like, I don't see any sort of indie darlings really coming out of the woodworks to steal anything like Moonlight.
No.
How about you?
No.
What were your criteria?
Okay. So my criteria, the films I put on this list were the films that made me think and feel and think about those feelings.
No, that's good.
That was it. That was it. I mean, I was just I didn't pay too much attention to a lot of the other critical lists, like the New York Times or Film Comment or other places. I mean, I have some of those on here, but not a lot, and didn't. Yeah, I mean, it was. These were the films that made me think and feel. And I'll tell you what. I'll start with the biggest one on my list, and that is Nope, Jordan Peele's film. I don't know that any film has made me think more than this one this year. I mean, he's really trading in so much metaphor and just metaphors on top of metaphors in this movie, and it's such a big movie. I think it rightly gets compared to Close Encounters of a Third Kind. It's got that kind of big sort of vibe to it. But I had a really good time just watching this film, and then as I'm watching it, thinking about it, and then continue to just kind of turn it over in my head the longer it's been since I've seen it. I haven't watched it again, which I'm looking forward to, but still, even having just seen it once in the theaters has been enough to just kind of, again, continue to roll around some of these things that are in the movie.
Yeah, I really, and Nope made my alternate list of things that if we got crossed up, then I would have added that one onto my list. I wonder if we're going to really, really appreciate what Peele is doing in his lifetime. Because again, I think he right now, as far as like your average movie goer, I think he has kind of a Shyamalan shine to him, like where he seems like he's the same sort of like not one trick pony, but he has that same sort of like thematic throughput on all of his films, right? I mean, like it's not the twist ending. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I mean, like this idea of metaphorical horror that kind of wears that metaphor on its sleeve. And I think he's bigger than that. And of course, that is very different than what Shyamalan did, or even Hitchcock did to that extent. I mean, Hitchcock was great with framing and shooting and pacing, and you know, he was a showman. What Peele is doing with the horror genre and with the sci-fi genre is one, just so shocking and surprising. Not because because again, coming from Key and Peele and coming from humor that wasn't always highbrow, and not that it had to be, it was funny, but it wasn't like, I don't think it was like transcendent humor necessarily. It wasn't, and then him coming and just bursting onto the scene with Get Out and then Us and then Nope. I think you've seen an audience reaction, and I guess the reason I say that is you see an audience reaction where Get Out is one of those movies that it hits people, and you can say why it was more successful. You can argue why it may have been more successful than the other ones. And, you know, is it because it stars white people, or it uses the white people as the main kind of plot line? And I'm not interested in that conversation per se, but what he's doing with his films, I think it's going to take some time to kind of like sit back and really watch his entire catalog and to see what he comes up with next. And again, he hasn't really faltered at all. There will be a time where he comes out and he's not going to make it. He said one of his films is not going to be as great. But I think you've seen like an audience reaction that's diminished film over film, because Get Out was accessible, and yes, there were themes there, and yes, it was, but they were easy to wrap your head around. They were obviously easy to point to the Easter eggs. Us a little bit more esoteric and about what he's actually trying to say there. And then Nope is a little bit different because it's not quite horror, right? It's definitely more sci-fi. It's definitely more. Also what he's doing is providing this vision and in this representation that doesn't or hasn't existed, and on the scale that he's showing it. Like, again, I know we mentioned this there in the Woman King episode, but the interactions between Daniel and Keke Palmer are just so like genuine and so like real life brother and sister, especially people of color brother and sister. So there's this thing there, in addition to the plot and the overall, you know, message that he's sending out, the things that he's doing is, I think he will be someone that, you know, when our grandkids have their Why Does Wilhelm Scream 3 podcast. Not that you and I are going to adopt kids together. I'm just saying. I'm not opposed to.
That was a weird way to frame that. Yeah.
It's a weird way to bring it up.
So how exactly would that? Never mind.
Look, the world's going to be.
Should we start talking about names like now?
Slightly more progressive. Yeah, exactly. But no, I really enjoyed it. I haven't watched it over and over again. I watched Get Out and Us quite a bit. Obviously, Us is a lot more visceral from the perspective of just pure horror. So it makes it a little bit more, again, Nope has a lot to unpack, and it's not really I think it's his most challenging film to date. And I don't think it forgives a lot. But yeah, good choice.
I think that as we go through this list, you'll see kind of a common thread with some of these films, the way you mentioned Kaluuya and Palmer and their interaction. Okay, what's your first one?
My first one is RRR, Rise, Roar, Revolt. Have you seen this? Have you heard about it? I haven't sat down to watch it. So I've heard about it. I've seen a bunch of stuff on it, and no, I still haven't watched it. I mean, it is an Indian film. It's a Bollywood film. It is a 3-hour film, but it's about the British occupation during India. There is a Indian policeman who works with the British. The British royalty is kind of running roughshod over India. They end up kidnapping is the wrong term. They end up taking this young tribal girl to their home, basically to work as an indentured servant, basically as a plaything. One of her tribes, one of her people goes off and sets off to find her. And he starts wreaking havoc within India. There's an Indian policeman who works for the British government who sets off to stop him. And while they're in the same city, they end up saving this young boy's life from a train accident. They become best friends, and then eventually they find out they're mortal enemies and they have to fight. But this movie is just kind of batshit crazy in the sense that it's heavy CGI. The two men are essentially superheroes. They're muscular, but they also do superhuman bouts of strength. During one big fight at the British consul embassy palace, they're throwing lions at people. Animals are. It's like they're doing ridiculous. Yeah, it really and then also you've got all of that coupled with your typical singing and dancing sequences in a Bollywood film, which provides a really good entry point for those types of movies. If you've never seen them, I would recommend you go back to the 60s and early 70s Indian films, because those are amazing. But RRR provides you with I'm also watching this badass action film, but then seeing this really ridiculously overblown and well choreographed dance and song production that you would see, in just about every Bollywood film. Like if you've seen Slumdog Millionaire, basically the end of Slumdog Millionaire, it's obviously the same thing. But yeah, right. No, it's just a lot of fun to watch. I mean, there's nothing other than just pure popcorn for 3 hours, but it is a blast to sit down and kind of just watch the insanity unfold. Because again, every time you see something, you think that they're not going to be able to top it, and then, like I said, the guy's going to be throwing a jaguar at another guy's head. So it's intense.
I want to sit down and watch it. I think the time or the length kind of puts me off. Where I'm like, do I want to give up 3 hours today to watch this? But I mean, I like action films sometimes. I like films that deal with colonialism or in a kind of like post-colonial sense. Examining those evils, but also examining kind of what happens within those systems as well. So, I mean, it sounds like really interesting. And any film that has people tossing jaguars and jungle cats at each other, I'm there for.
Right. Yeah. I will say the 3 hours is daunting. It is not something that you have to sit down in one sitting to eat. I mean, like you could break it up if you wanted to and come back to it, the next
just
day.
Just like Falling for Christmas.
Right. This movie is just like Falling for Christmas, which brings me to my number 2, Falling for Christmas. No, I'm kidding.
No, here's my number 2 is Petite Maman. Celine Sciamma's latest film, where basically a young girl, I think she's 8 years old, is mourning the loss of her maternal grandmother, and her mother is not handling it not taking it very well. And the little girl eventually runs into another little girl in the woods out behind their at their house, and it is a younger version of her mother. And they become best friends, and they build a fort out of sticks, and it's really kind of charming and whimsical. And this question of who were our parents, how do we see them, what is that relationship about? It's nice. It's an intimate, kind of delicate film, and it takes a look at the world, the adult world, through kind of, the eyes of a curious child. And so I really have you had a chance to see that one? Have you?
I have not yet. No, it's on my list, but I have not seen it yet.
Yeah.
It sounds
I will sit down and watch any Celine Sciamma film I'm going to watch. I mean, it's different from her other films in that it doesn't have the heaviness or some of the seriousness that the themes of gender or even like queer identity, carry in some of those earlier films. But this is still just as serious, I think, in a different way.
Yeah, no, sounds awesome. Right. I mean, I don't mean that. That sounds like when I say that, it sounds like I'm being facetious. But no, it's been on my list for a while. I've wanted to check it out. I just haven't. I was too busy. I couldn't. I was still watching RRR when I.
Yeah, you're still watching because this is a short one. I forget how long this is, but I think it's like around 80 minutes or something. So it's not very long. It's sort of like the anti-RRR.
Right. It's like eating broccoli. You actually get time back in your life if you watch Petite Maman. My next one is I'm going to go with Everything Everywhere All at Once. I know this is probably going to be a lot of top 10 list ones, but I like the Daniels film. I like Swiss Army Man a lot. I like, and so obviously I haven't seen it. It's about a woman who's put upon. She's got a lot of things, bad stuff going on in her life. I mean, bad stuff going on, and she's coming on middle age, and her husband's not who she thought he should be. She's not who she thought she should be. Her daughter's kind of, and she stumbles upon a multi-dimensional multiverse of herself and realizes that across the multiverse that she's a badass. She's all kinds of different things, and that even to the point where she's got hot dog fingers and she's bisexual, or she's a rock. And this may be the easiest choice on my list from a perspective of like, this is going to make other top 10 lists and things like that. I think there's one other one on here that is as well. But this was so much like, in a time where like this would have been a movie, I guess, in a non-COVID time, I think would have gotten kind of swept under the radar. I don't know if this, I know A24 would have still put it out. I think people would have really enjoyed it. I don't think it would have, if it hadn't have had the ability to kind of sit in theaters for a while and come out the same time around, like as Shang-Chi and like before Top Gun Maverick. And it had a little bit of time to build some legs and some word of mouth to it. And it was able to actually sit in theaters. I think that helped it out quite a bit, but it's obviously, having Ke Huy Quan come back, and just kind of and I apologize if I'm saying his name wrong. His resurrect his acting career and finally get a call and him, obviously there's a lot of good story and good feeling around that movie, but it was just, to me, it was really inventive. It was really well done. It wore its heart on its sleeve. It paid great tribute to its actors that were in it. Jamie Lee Curtis is great. Michelle Yeoh is great. James Hong is great. So, it was just a lot of fun. And I felt just one of those movies that when it was over, I was really, really giddy about having seen it. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is a fantastic film. I think I put this on my alternate list in case we had like crossovers, but Michelle Yeoh is so good in this. And she just shows this film lets her do everything she's good at. Even if she hasn't been able to do those in other films, but it just lets her do everything. And she is so great at all of it. I don't think no one else could have played that role. And maybe I'm saying that because now she's kind of embodied that, but I don't think it works with with anyone else.
Yeah, and they dance the line of like, obviously, hot dog fingers and turning into a rock, or and fighting with butt plugs and dildos, and like, it's just, I mean, but I think, but they were able to make a movie about a farting Daniel Radcliffe being a heartfelt, beautiful, movie about mental health, and so to be, those guys again, you sit back and you think who really are like the potential greats of your era, and I mean I know that there's both Peele and the Daniels are still a few films in, but it's exciting to see what those guys will come up with next for sure.
Yeah, and I think these guys, I think the Daniels really lean into that sense of I guess absurdism or surrealism or ridiculousness.
Right.
I mean, they just really own it, and so I think it works because of that. Right. I mean, I think like you said, the hot dog fingers or the farting Daniel Radcliffe, because they own it, because they take it seriously without it being heavy. Right. I mean, it's not like they assign.
Yeah, it's a really fine line of the comedy. I mean, to step on you there, but it's a really fine line of the comedy that they're playing, because they don't ever play it. They play it, I don't know, it just seems like they're playing it to the right degree on everything that they try. And yes, I do think you're sitting there in the theater thinking that, oh man, okay, hot dog fingers and mustard coming out. That's ridiculous, but you're still willing to buy it. And because I guess their actors trust in them. Again, if you're watching a farting Daniel Radcliffe and a Paul Dano riding him across the ocean, that's a triumphant scene in that. But no, we're not talking about Swiss Army Man. But the way that they're able to skirt that line of never like losing you in the moments where you. In a less steady hand, you definitely would be lost. You would have found yourself outside of the movie. They're able to skirt that line somehow, and it's impressive.
Good pick. Okay. My next one is Joanna Hogg's latest, Eternal Daughter, with Tilda Swinton. Tilda Swinton playing two roles. This is speaking of
year for Swinton. Like Swinton was in everything this year.
People are finally starting to see her worth. Jason.
Yeah, it's nice to see she's getting some recognition.
She's finally getting recognition. The Eternal Daughter is kind of in the Souvenir universe, where Tilda Swinton plays a filmmaker named Julie, maybe not the same Julie from the Souvenir, but still same job, same name. Right. And Tilda Swinton also plays Julie's mother in this film, as she does in the Souvenir film. So yeah. Anyway, they go to spend the mother's birthday at a small castle in Wales. And that's kind of, that's it. They have dinner, they stay at this hotel. This is a film that examines really, I think, two things: parent-child relationships, how perhaps we become a version of our parents, whether we mean to or not, how we start to see similar qualities in each other, how we start to understand each other in ways that weren't possible at earlier ages. Then how we sort of miss these loved ones once they're gone, how we mourn them, what we remember, what we regret. The film also raises the question of who has the right to tell someone else's story for art's sake, right? Who has the right to make art out of someone else's life? I would say everyone does, but that's just me. It's a kind of ghost story. She is really playing with like the haunted house tropes and the ghost story tropes. And you kind of, and I'm not going to give anything away with this film, but you sort of, what's coming. And even though you know what's coming, it's still effective and it's still moving, and you still sort of, fight back a little bit of the tears. I think this was a COVID production as well. And you can tell because there's like 4 people total, I think in this right. movie, and a dog, but it's good. And a lot of the same Joanna Hogg kind of, calling cards, the way she frames these shots, her use of kind of muted colors, playing with the landscape as well. It's great. All of these films so far have a kind of familial relationship, right, baked into the plot. That's not going to go away. Spoiler alert for the rest of the films.
All right. And you can read more about that at sometimesbrockgetsad.com.
It is Christmas time.
My number 3 is called Something in the Dirt by Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson. It is a very, very small independent film, which I said I didn't do, but I looked back on my list and I forgot this one was on there. They did movies called, like, one's called The Endless, the other one's called Spring. I think you can find those on Shudder and Netflix. If not, I'm not 100% sure if Spring's still around, but they do these kind of think PC sci-fi films. This movie is about two men who live in this apartment complex in LA. One's kind of a drifter, one's a little bit more put together than the other one. But these kind of unnatural phenomenon start happening in their apartment, or in one of their apartments. And they start to, they have this idea of capturing it on videotape and making a documentary. And all the while you're kind of watching that documentary unfold, but it's a movie about, their relationship, and it kind of ebbing and flowing and growing and falling apart. And it's just a really fun little sci-fi movie that I have really kind of an affinity for. These movies that are just, two-handers that don't have a lot of budget, but know how to do what they do well with their special effects. The plot, I will say this about the plot and the movie as a whole, is in these movies, if you're looking for neat and tidy resolutions, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. It's kind of like Primer in the sense where it's going to make you think a little bit. This one's a little funnier than Primer. It's different, but it doesn't wrap everything up for you in a neat little bow. It makes you work for it in a sense. And then throughout the plot of the film, basically they've been filming this phenomenon and trying to get it to escalate so it can kind of build to a crescendo for their documentary, and things start to fall apart and they start recreating footage. So a lot of it is, did it happen? Did it not happen? Kind of back and forth, and they start bringing in extras and actors and things like that. But it's along the same lines of like The Endless and Spring. But it was a lot of, I really, really enjoyed it. I was like kind of just drawn in while watching it in the theater, just drawn into really, really loving their stories and loving the back and forth. And these two guys, it really ultimately, this is another COVID production as well, where these guys were just in an apartment together, not being able to make bigger movies, and just made this one because they wanted to make movies with their friends and still hang out. So anyway, Something in the Dirt is my number 3.
Listeners who may notice a dip in audio production quality, we are recording this remotely, so I'm doing my best.
Right. We sincerely apologize, but, obviously, probably the less you can hear us is honestly better for everyone involved. So,
yeah. And let's be honest, you're not paying for this. So,
yes, it's worth every penny that you're paying for it.
Right. I mean, what do you want for free? Okay, back to the list here. My next one is Kogonada's film After Yang, starring Colin Farrell and Jodie Turner-Smith. Kogonada makes these slow, intimate films that are just gorgeous to look at. I thought I loved Columbus when I saw it. These, the tension, what it is in his films come from these small, quiet moments. Architecture gets used as an objective correlative in Columbus, and in After Yang, it's kind of an examination of AI, objects, technology. At the center is a kind of examination of panpsychism, looking at, do these things that we use every day, do they have feelings? I mean, that's a little kind of wishy-washy way to put it. It's much more kind of in depth than that. But I really like the questions that it kind of raises of how we use the technology we use every day, and what counts as technology, and where is technology going. And when we see Yang is like a robotic sibling, right, for Colin Farrell and Jodie Turner-Smith's daughter, Mika. And Colin Farrell discovers his memory bank and he sees like this whole life that this robotic sibling had, and that he was in a relationship, and that he got sad, and that he had these attachments to people, but also to a specific song. It's really moving and beautiful, and I really like Kogonada's work, starting even with his, video essays examining film. So
speaking of another person who's having quite the year, I think if Farrell doesn't walk away with an Oscar this year for one of these roles, the other being The Banshees of Inisherin, I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah,
right. I mean, and Banshees didn't make my list. I really, really liked that movie, and I think Farrell was phenomenal in both of these. And it's funny to think back when we tried to make him an action star. Not that he wasn't halfway decent as an action star, but like putting him in the Total Recall remake and like things like Phone Booth and what The Recruit, and you have this talent that I think take a minute for him to even find. I mean, obviously I know why you make those movies, right? They back a dump truck full of money up to your door. And then like, I'm sure they're going to say, yeah, you're going to work with Pacino and it's fine. Just, yeah.
Hello, Cool J.
and again, like another monster pairing that we've all been waiting for is Al Pacino and LL Cool J together.
I do think Colin Farrell was under some of the influence of cocaine in making some of those movies as well.
True. I do recall that being a factor. But I mean, like I watched him in Banshees and was just blown away by like how beautiful that role really was. And how beautiful he is in it, and the same with After Yang. These, like, if anyone's having like really breakout years that we should pay attention to, obviously it's Lydia from Tar. I mean, we need to be careful with her. We definitely need to be careful with her because she can get out of control. But then it's also Colin Farrell. So well done. Are we ready for my number 4?
We are.
All right, my number 4 is Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. And again, this may be kind of obviously there's something about Jenny Slate in that voice, which is just kind of like heartwarming anyway. But I had been a fan of the shorts when they first came out. I think, had this been a Disney movie, this to me should have been in a year that was actually had quite a few decent and I shouldn't say decent. I had some really, really good family movies come out. I think Encanto was really good. I think Turning Red was really good. The Sea Beast on Netflix was actually really good as well. But this one stood out to me as just, and I saw this in a theater full of people right as it was coming out in the Oak Cliff Film Festival. And it really, this was a movie that needed to be seen, I think, with a group of people kind of crying and kind of feeling the emotional, and the comedy of this movie is, and they did such a really good job, not only with the special effects and how it was, how it was all filmed and played out and the structure in which it was played out, but just staying true to that kind of innocent wonder and really the beauty. The one complaint, is it gets a little too, I guess, meta in a way where it's just, where everyone's looking for Marcel's family. If it had stayed kind of insular, it may have been a little bit better. I mean, like it would have been more of an emotional punch, but ultimately I really, really had a lot of fun with it. And I think, like I said, if this had been a Disney production rather than a 24 production, which this would have made money hand over fist. And we'd be looking at Marcel lunchboxes and people with Marcel, hoodies and Marcel dolls, and they would have marketed the shit out of this. I mean, that probably would have detracted from it, to be quite honest. But this movie deserved to be $100 million film that people go back to and talk about and revisit with their grandparents and their family members. Again, talking about, and I know it's not an art. I mean, I guess you could say it's kind of an art house film, but I mean, for you're wanting to make, one of these movies that can reach an audience of kids that's not so heavy-handed, and not heavy-handed is the wrong term, but not so heavy and not encapsulated in an art house shell, if you will. The perfect one for this, right? I mean, and again, I know you have the same themes in a lot of kids' movies, but I mean, this one where it seems more real, obviously, because there's a realness to the character. I mean, there's a tactile realness to the character. And I mean, I know he's not real, but I don't hope I'm not spoiling anything for anybody out there, that a mollusk can actually talk. And again, I'm just drawn in. I love, like, there's ads on, hell, even ads on YouTube. I think there's A24 ads on YouTube that's selling the Marcel figurine, and it's still cute. I don't know. It gets to me. I like it.
Yeah, I was a big fan of this film. I was a big fan of the YouTube shorts when they first came out. I think the one thing, I mean, look, Brock might get sad sometimes, but I don't cry very often. So everyone around me, when I saw it in the theater too, everyone around me was crying as well. I think the one thing, not to talk bad about Marcel the Shell, the one thing that maybe was a detractor for me was I thought it was a little too sentimental. The sentimentality was a little too much, but I think that's an after effect of making those YouTube shorts into a narrative feature length film.
Right.
I loved it too. I'm surprised that it hasn't continued to get bigger and bigger, but I think Jimmy Slick is great as well.
To me, it's pretty inexplicable, honestly. I mean, for especially as you like, and not that I'm championing this mindset, but as you get people who are having Disney backlash for whatever, this is a movie that really speaks to everyone. It speaks to family. I mean, it's weird to me that it's not more beloved. I'm not sure why it didn't strike a chord the way that I thought it would, for whatever reason. I mean, like, again, because there's no message here that people, unless you're just anti-mollusk or you're just or anthropomorphized shells.
Anti-family.
Right. Or unless you're anti-family, which, I mean, it could be the case. I don't know. But it seems to me that this could have been bigger, and for whatever reason, it's not.
Okay. So speaking of being anti-family, my last film on this list is Aftersun. And I know we've talked about this before. And obviously you see the theme in all of these films that I didn't realize until I put them together. But there's all this like child-parent relationship, themes, how we relate to our parents, how we relate to our kids, how we relate to our siblings. But this film about a father and daughter vacation, a film about grief, a film about loss, a film about how we remember those that are gone, how our memories and experience kind of intersect and fade into one another. I just find this film to be really, really fresh in its attempt to create kind of its own cinematic language. The way it plays with time, the way it frames Callum as Sophie remembers him, how it leaves out some of what she doesn't know for sure, and how it kind of fills in some of the other things as well. I love this movie.
Yeah, I've never seen and maybe I'm just missing it. Maybe obviously I haven't seen every movie, but like this coming of age story framed in the aftermath, not aftermath, but the actual happening of a parent who's passing, and you're remembering it. And it was such a beautiful, quiet, unassuming film. In the moments but there were moments where it was assuming, and where it was kind of in your, like it did want to draw you out and provide some sort of emotional punch to it. But I like I said, I know we talked about it again, like you said, we talked about it, but some of how it was framed, it was such a confident first film. And I know that she's done shorts, and this is not like it's the first time that she's ever stepped behind a camera, but to pull off the things that she pulled off and to show this and to have two people, one very young person pull off this type of role, which requires so much of her, is just really, really impressive. Yeah, I was really taken aback after we watched it, because it really was great.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, even though this isn't the first time she stepped behind the camera, she does it with so much confidence. I mean, she really goes for it, and this makes it sound like it's showy, and it's not showy. Some of the devices that she uses, some of the way that she shows or that she frames these characters is just, it's so slick and it's so smart. And I was rewatching it, and I had forgotten that there's one scene that starts being filmed through a camcorder, and the camcorder gets turned off. And then we watch the rest of the scene through the reflection on a TV screen, but then also on the mirror behind the TV screen.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's fucking incredible. And it's ballsy, because that could easily come off as heavy-handed, right? Or as a little too showy, and it doesn't. And so I think, it's that confidence with which she goes for stuff like that, and then how it actually comes off. So yeah, I'm excited to see what she does after this.
Yeah, me too. Very much so. Okay, my last one is
Charlotte Wells is her name. I'm sorry. Charlotte Wells is the director's name.
I think you said it earlier, but yeah.
Okay.
My last one is the other film that you and I saw in theaters this year together, which I guess we saw 3, because we saw Crimes of the Future. And then we saw other things. We saw Glass. I don't know. I'm saying why I'm characterizing. Maybe it was just you and me.
God, wow.
When our grandkids talk about this story, they're going to be very confused about what actually transpired.
Remember when the grandpas went to go see movies?
That's how they first met. I'm just thinking of like a sitcom premise of my two podcasting grandfathers.
They're not really grandfathers. The grandkids aren't really related, but still.
It's a really convoluted theme song that explains the premise of the show.
The theme song is like the entire length of the episode. That's just all it is.
Right.
Once a week you get the theme song that explains the relationship, and like that's it, because it's so convoluted you forget each week, and then you have to be reminded.
Wait a minute, what are we doing here?
Yeah, what's happening? Right. They're grandkids, but not really, and the grandparents aren't.
So my number 5 is Neptune Frost.
Yeah.
From a movie perspective, that I'm still like not 100% sure of what I watched. We talked about this in the Woman King episode as well, but this is kind of an Afro-futuristic, techno sci-fi musical. And it is confounding. It is really, I don't know. It's beautiful. It's it's progressive, but it also is infuriating at times. I mean, the movie literally says about 15 minutes in, "What the fuck is going on?" Essentially, do you know what's going on? And the answer is a resounding no, but it's so captivating. It's so captivating. It's so enthralling that I mixed those two words together when I said them previously. Is that's how good it is. No, it's just so. It is so. Like I said, you can't take your eyes off of it. And when we first stepped away from it, there were things that were kind of on the nose that I thought that were annoying. But going back and watching it again, those are lessened because I know that they're coming and I can kind of forgive them. Again, I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that this is going to be on anybody else's list, but I definitely think this is a movie that people should seek out and watch and see what they think and take away from it. It is because again, it's one of those films. It's very rare to say that you will not ever, but you will not see another film like this year. It is so different. It is so again. confident what it's trying to say. And it's, like I said, it's set in a universe that no other film is going to be set in. That these types of movies are the ones, again, you want a back pocket movie, the one that you can pick out and say, hey, throw this on the table and let's all watch this together. You should go watch this and tell me what you think about it. Neptune Frost is absolutely it. And it's, and not to the point of like, it has to be like this gimmick, but it's like I said, it was a revelation, and I'm glad we kind of stumbled on it while we were trying to go see Cronenberg's latest.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I tend to agree with you in parts where it's not always successful, but even those moments are worth watching and worth seeing what the filmmakers are doing. I mean, it's really a kind of performance piece more than it is a film. And so I think for that reason, I think much more willing to sort of let a lot of things go, or let a lot of things that I think we would hold other films, hold their feet to the fire or whatever, to kind of forgive those and let them go. I think it's fantastic. It was going to be on my list, but because I brought it up during the Woman King episode, I left it off and sort of figured I thought one of us would put it on there because it really is just such a unique experience to watch that. It's streaming on the Criterion channel. If you have that, I think you can rent it.
I need to watch it again then. I didn't know it was on there yet. So
yeah.
That was, and I hope they release that as a Criterion Blu-ray. That would be a really, really fun one to have. And just to kind of dig in the special features. Absolutely. That's the type of film that Criterion could pump up, right? And bring light to, with a really, really special release. I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
What were your alternative selections? We don't have to talk about them. We can just kind of rattle them off.
Sure. So let me find them here. So what I put under like honorable mention, I had Decision to Leave. I had The Worst Person in the World, The Woman King, Men, and Crimes of the Future.
Nice. You liked Crimes of the Future better than I did. I just had a few. I had Nope on my list as well. I had The Banshees of Inisherin, and then I had Pearl by Ty West, the horror movie follow up for actually the prequel to X. So yeah. So those are my other ones. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not. I think there are gems to be found. I think it's still weird to me that like Glass Onion and. I mean, I understand why Tar is being touted. I get that. I mean, look, we're naysayers at heart anyway. I mean, that's fine. And that film definitely deserves some naysayers. It shouldn't be received with universal acclaim.
It has better naysayers than us as well. So we are not the only naysayers, and it has smarter naysayers than us. So.
That's a good name for our podcast. Smarter naysayers than us.
Yeah. I was just putting us in the cool kids camp.
Right. That's all we really want to be is that, because you remember the cool kids hate everything, and that's where we are.
Also, we're Gen X, so we hate everything anyway.
Right. We're just in a general state of malaise, and we hate everything.
Malaise and ennui. And
I still don't understand the love for Glass Onion. That will befuddle me for a really long time. The laziness of the writing of that movie was just awful. And so, if that gets awards and accolades and recognition, I don't understand that, because that speaks to the year that 2022 is. If that's the case, is that there's just shit out there that shouldn't be, that just shouldn't be.
Right. And we just listed off 10 plus films that are well worth your time.
Right. Absolutely.
Well worth your time to watch. Much more so than Glass Onion. I mean, I'm not even sure that I would watch Glass Onion over Mindcage.
No, because I mean, like with Mindcage, right? I mean, like I hesitate to say that that's the best that they could do, but like at least Mindcage, I don't know. I mean, they're kind of the same to me.
It's not the sense of laziness in Mindcage that there is in Glass Onion.
Right. I can forgive the dropped threads of trying to throw everything at the wall and seeing what sticks in a movie, and then just really, I'm going to name drop and cameo my way to what appears to be jokes that Glass Onion does. So
Julian Flynn wrote this for me. Yeah, you can fucking tell.
The less we say about Glass Onion, which is probably not going to happen, the better. So let's get into because I'm really, really excited to talk about both of these films.
Yeah, me too.
Let's talk about our not a white elephant, but our film gift exchange for 2022. Who wants to go first? It doesn't matter to me. We want to do Funeral Parade of Roses, or do you want to do Athena first?
Let's do Funeral Parade of Roses because it's first on my notes here. So this is the film that you gifted me, and I'm very grateful for this gift. So this is Funeral Parade of Roses, a 1969 Japanese film directed by Toshiya Matsumoto. Look, basically the story, I'll just give kind of a quick kind of synopsis. The story follows Eddie, a trans woman, and her kind of daily trials and tribulations. She works at a place called the Bar Genet with other transgender women, and they're kind of hostesses, right? They're there to sort of entertain the clientele. If something takes place or transpires with the clientele outside of the bar, I think that's fine. It's not frowned upon. She is having an affair.
Sorry, I misstepped on you. It seems like being indulging in gay culture is kind of in vogue in Japan at this particular point in time. Whether that was true in 1969, I can't imagine that actually being true. But the film posits that a lot of heterosexual males frequent these bars full of what in the film they call gay boys. I know that's not necessarily passe at this point, but that's what the film positions them as, and also trans women. And it's really seen as somewhat of a kind of a hipster populist kind of thing to be doing at the time.
Yeah, this seems so. When I was still drinking, when I was still going out to bars, I would end up at a lot of gay bars. I had gay and lesbian friends, and you'd run into people when you're out drinking, as one does, and you'd end up, different types of bars. It was always another bar. It wasn't kind of a curio object. It wasn't a thing to sort of say, oh, look where I am. Oh my gosh, this is so odd and different. It was just another place to go. But that's kind of the vibe that I got from this film, was that the people coming to this bar were going to the bar because they like going to the bar. And yes, I think there is, and I'm going to get into this too, but there is a kind of examination of gay culture in Japan at the time in the film. And there's a kind of curiosity, but it seems like a genuine curiosity rather than, a judgmental curiosity.
Right. It's not mocking.
Right. And so that was, you see, in one scene, you see you see a man and his wife walk into this bar, and they're just, they don't gawk. They don't sort of stare. They almost seem like they're known, but they go in, they sit, they have drinks, they socialize. And this is one of the things that I really liked about this film. I love this film, by the way. But one of the things I really liked about this film was that there wasn't that kind of judgment, that it was just every day. Eddie, as a trans woman, walks along the streets just as she is, right? She goes out with friends, right, as they are, and that's it. And you see men hit on them, you see men, ask for dates, but you never see anybody say anything derogatory. You never see anybody.
The only time that you do, and it's presented, in a sense of empowerment for Eddie and his crew, or her crew, excuse me, it was when the women call them fags, and then and again that's and she's and get into a cat fight with them, and because what you're supposed to take away from that, obviously, is that Eddie and her crew are more women than they're more attractive, or they're taking over the spot of what the Japanese women who are born biologically women are, and so there is a a competitiveness and obviously a jealousy there from what Eddie is able to accomplish.
But even that fight scene, even that fight was set up by the friend of Lita, who Eddie is kind of like taking her place. Right. So that was even kind of like an arranged, violent confrontation. And so I love the three cis women who fight Eddie and her friends. I love their little kind of like, I don't know, gang sign or like kind of, gang stacking that they do before they fight. It's just this choreographed kind of movement of them showing how tough they are. It was okay. So Eddie, I just kind of like mentioned, Eddie's having an affair with Gonda, who owns the bar. Gonda's in a relationship with Lita, who's sort of like the head girl, right? The head mistress at the bar.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of La Cage Falls, right? I mean, there's a act that goes on during, and so basically Eddie is trying to position for being the lead of whatever this establishment is, and to be the kind of the lead show person, the people, the main draw of the establishment.
So this film bounces around timeline wise a lot. And so, but we see at a certain point in the film that when Eddie was a child, as a young boy, she was abused by her father. And then the father then abandons Eddie and her mother. At one point, Eddie tells her mother that, look, Mom, Dad's gone, but at least you still have me. And the mom laughs. Right, laughs at the young boy Eddie. Later on, she watches her mother with another man, and she comes in and stabs and kills both of them. As an adult, we see Eddie and Gonda leave an apartment. We see Eddie see Lita, who sees them kind of, after their tryst. This kind of sets off a sort of panic attack in Eddie. And she's walking along the street. She kind of encounters a protest. She stumbles into an art exhibition that is all about masks. And there's a voiceover within the exhibition talking about how people wear 2-3 masks to hide from loneliness, right? To present something else to other people so that they're not alone, so that they can be, I think, accepted. I mean, and this is clearly sort of a bigger metaphor in the film as well. She also runs into her friend Guevara, who looks like Che Guevara, right. Except his beard is glued on, which is a great touch. But he's an underground filmmaker, again, part of this artistic community that Eddie is also part of. And so, he finds her and sort of helps her, through the rest of the day, I think, as it goes on. And so this is the other thing about this film. We are actually watching like 3 films. Yeah. So we see, the film that we're watching, Funeral Parade of Roses, we're watching that film that stars Eddie doing all these things. We also have these kind of intercuts of a documentary that's being made about what they call gay boy culture, but which also seems to be a documentary about the film that we're watching. Right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
And then we see Guevara's film, who he's making kind of like, an experimental film sort of about the same thing.
Right.
And so there's all that stuff going on, which is great. It's kind of all like cut between. And again, this film just, it bounces around everywhere. And it reminds me of what Godard said, that a story needs to have a beginning, middle, and end, just not necessarily in that order. That's very, I think, one way to watch this. So, I mean, kind of back to this idea of a plot. We see earlier moments of like Eddie out doing regular things with her friends, other trans women. And there's this great shot of, I think there's 4 of them, and they're all, in the restroom standing at urinals together, like in their skirts. And it's just a great, I mean, it's a really cool, composed shot. But again, this kind of statement of sort of who they are. Okay, so at a certain point, that fight with the gang after that fight, Ganda goes to Lita's, and Lita expresses this kind of like faux concern of Eddie, and Ganda gets pissed and sort of, I think, implies that, he's leaving her for Eddie. Lita then is later found having committed suicide on her bed and surrounded by roses. On the floor, Eddie finds 2 dolls, one with a nail through its chest and one with 2 nails through its eyes. After Lita's funeral, Eddie and Ganda are together. Ganda finds a diary that contains a photo of Eddie as a young boy with her parents. There's a hole burned through the father's face, but Ganda recognizes Eddie's mother as his lover, as his former wife, and realizes that Eddie is his child. Ganda kills himself with a knife. Eddie, seeing the aftermath, and she too realizes what's happened, what's been implied. She stabs her eyes out with the same knife and wanders out into a crowd gathered in the street. I mean, the base for this film, the very base is Oedipus.
Oedipus, right? Yeah.
But again, that narrative has been queered, and right. We've talked about this before. But the Oedipus narrative is queered in this instance, and she kills her mother and sleeps with her father in a different way. I absolutely love this movie. Yeah, it's shot in this like really gorgeous, contrasty black and white as well.
Yeah, and it does all of these, all of the filmmaking styles that you see in the variety of films that are in the movie. So as you're watching, and as we're talking about it, it may sound more confusing. It really is not. The way that it's able to construct all of this is really, really amazing. So at certain points, you are watching a scene in particular one sex scene, and then you pull back and you see the film crew in the bedroom scene, and you see Eddie writhing around on the bed, obviously not having sex, but looking like they're having sex in there, and then they get. They provide Eddie her clothes after the scene is over. So you're basically taking a step back and watching the film that you were just watching and you were seeing as a sex scene, taking it back and looking at it from a perspective of the film being made. There's all these other devices that they use. He speeds up the camera for comedic effect. One of the through lines in this movie is that there's this drug epidemic happening in Japan, and there's drug trade going on with Ganda as well, and he's hiding drugs in vases and hiding them from the cops. There's one scene where the two kind of diva women are arguing with one another, and they're basically calling each other names, but voice bubbles pop up on the screen rather than, and it's just so fanciful and like whimsical and like you said, the Godard black and white and the way that this is filmed, it is just so gorgeous to watch, and to watch these scenes of people kissing and engaged with one another. The orgy scene where they're dancing around is so much fun too. And again, all of this, it sounds like it's salacious, but really none of it is ever, like we talked about before, none of it ever played as mocking. None of it is ever played as like where you see something like, and again, I know that this has been talked about mainly by the actresses, but like you see something where where you see a movie like Blue is the Warmest Color, which can be played as kind of like exploitative, right? Where it's really just for the male gaze. This is not like this is all. And what's crazy is this is 1969. This movie is being made, and like the attitudes of what you would believe most people have in their head of a Japanese culture, which has got to be stodgy and uptight and all about social mores and morality and to where this is the not an underbelly. This is a totally normal, accepted facet of life. I think it's really too also the way that this is shot, and seeing Japan, 1960s Japan, is really, really beautiful as well. It's just great to see those city streets, just like watching a good art film when you're watching them, roll down the streets in Paris. It's the exact same thing, but this is just set in Japan.
Well, this film, I'm watching this film and I'm thinking of like French New Wave stuff. Right? I'm thinking of Godard films, because that's what this filmmaker is doing. I mean,
but not just mimicking it though, right? I mean, like taking it
not at all, right?
Level, right? I mean, like it's one thing to watch Godard and make a Godard film. It is another thing to elevate that art form and take it to a place where I don't think Godard was capable of taking it to. Right.
Yeah. I in no way want to imply that this filmmaker is just mimicking or ripping off Godard. I think that this filmmaker clearly, is a student of the art and had seen all of this stuff that came before and was like, I know how to do this with my work, right? I know how to make this my own. I know how to sort of turn this into something else, or like you said, elevate it into a different form. I mean, it really is its own kind of genre too. I mean, as loath as I am to put anything in a genre category, right? But I mean, I can't think of another. I can't think of another film that falls into like a kind of queer cinema category that is this fucking good.
And for it to be this fucking good and to be this fucking unknown.
Right.
Which you could write entire classes about this film. I mean, like I don't think it'll ever happen, but I would love to show this at the Fort Worth Film Club. I would love to see this with an audience and have them blown away by it and to talk about it afterwards. This is the type of movie that, again, if you feel like you're a movie lover and if you feel like you're a serious movie lover for sure, which I know that sounds douchey as fuck, but like this is a movie that you should see, that you should seek out, that this is an important movie. I don't use that. I know that sounds self-important, right? But I mean, I don't mean that with hyperbole. I think this is a movie that should be spoken about in terms of the best movies that have ever been made. And I honestly, that sounds ridiculous, but I wholeheartedly believe it. I saw this a few years ago when they did the restoration, and I saw it in the theaters, and I was mesmerized, and I couldn't believe that the first time I'd heard about it was just on the Texas Theater website, which is great. I'm glad that happened, but and I know that it probably, I don't know. I don't know. It's the film's full history, but this is another one of those movies that like, it really should be celebrated. We should be Funeral Parade of Roses should be people's top 10 films of all time. And I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, it really deserves way more recognition. And I think if nothing else, for the way we just put it in conversation with these other well-known artists and films. I mean, the fact that we watch something like this and we think of Godard, we think of French New Wave, we think of it in comparison to maybe some of the other films that were being made in Japan at the time. Right. I mean, I can't think of anything in the States. I mean, maybe some of like Warhol stuff. But I mean, that was more, experimental, not, I mean, this movie was made to be seen like, in the theaters. It wasn't made as a kind of necessary like performance art piece like Warhol was thinking, right? I mean, this was right. I mean, this was a serious film, and I don't always think Warhol was a serious person. But I mean,
no, I don't think so either. And I love most of Warhol's what he had his fingerprints on, right? In fact, I will go to bat for Flesh for Frankenstein or Young Dracula or however you want to. Those two movies every single day of the week, but those weren't this. I mean, those are beautiful art house films made by, I would dare to say, geniuses, but also those were movies that were I've got a castle and I've got some good looking people. So let's just throw together something and see what we come out of it with.
Right.
Those are not, I don't think those movies had any intention. I think they intended to be art, but I think they intended to be pop art 100%. This is a seminal film that like I said, I don't know. It's again, when you speak of these new wave movies, this should be at the forefront of the discussion.
Yeah, it really should. And I did not mean to pigeonhole it into queer cinema, because I think it is. Again, like, I don't like categories. I don't like genre, and so I just want to make that clear that I did not necessarily watch this through the lens of just queer cinema. So
right, because it presents it as so matter of fact, and is so
yes.
like, I mean, yes, you have, and like even the whole mask line, the whole mask idea, and this idea of the interviews with the homosexual men and the transgender women, it's so honest and truth seeking that it's never a derogatory. You're never meant to feel like I'm making fun of these people or I'm even trying to get at some sort of perversion. It's just more of, why do you feel this way? And right. Do you feel different? And can you truly explain, why you feel this way? And do you think you're going to do it forever? And again, I know that those questions now can sound dismissive, but the way that they're presented in the film, it's not that. It really is coming from a place of trying to find understanding and genuine curiosity and interest in that person, rather than just being a curio to figuring some, as some sort of freak show or what have you. I mean, like, just trying to put some people into a bucket, of curiosity. Yeah.
I love the interviews are so great, because they are open-ended questions. They're not questions where the interviewer is trying to get the interviewee, the subject, to sort of frame the responses in a certain way. It's just, why do you do this? Well, and some have different answers, and some say, I don't know, it just feels right. Are you going to do it forever? I don't know, but I'm going to do it today and tomorrow. So, but that's great. And I think the masks, that is so clearly pointed at the kind of, cis straight community, rather than like the trans community too. It's saying like no, these are the people wearing masks. Just because Eddie is wearing a wig and makeup, Eddie is not wearing a mask, right? Eddie is sort of showing herself as she wants to be seen.
Well, and furthering on that point, right, where they break it down, where like you are interviewing PETA, who's playing Eddie, and talking about how they're the same. Like, I mean, so you're interviewing the actor who's playing Eddie and figuring out where, and I apologize, I don't know how PETA actually, identified. So if I'm getting that wrong, I apologize. But it just further expounds on that. And even to the comic point where, you've got Che's beard when he sneezes coming off, in steam, it all is so, like I said, we talk about like confident films and just, and something that knows who the fuck it is and what it's trying, this movie, like, and that's the thing too, is that of all of these new wave films, like I've never seen anything like this before, ever, or anything since. I mean, obviously since, but I mean, but it's so mind blowing that, again, I know there was an influence on Kubrick, but Kubrick for the most part took an influence for the, for some of the sped up scenes and kind of the cut off music pieces that show up in Clockwork Orange, which are good, which are obviously good in this, and kind of weirdly underplay a playful tone, in Funeral Parade of Roses. But yeah, I don't have enough hyperbole or good things to say about this. It's again, of the back pocket movies that I have as a cinephile, this is one of the ones I'll throw out every single time.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did, because it was it's incredible. And yeah, I found a Blu-ray on let's see, Cinelicious Picks is where I
they're the ones who did the restoration of it, actually.
Okay.
So
I don't have enough I don't have enough superlatives to throw at this film either. And it's one that I'm just going to stop people on the streets or at parties and tell them to go watch.
I mean, like it should be. It would go. I mean, like, I don't know. Again, as society moves throughout its progressive pendulum, right? I mean, it's one of those movies that I think it would be important to see. I know that there's a lot of terminology, right, that doesn't sit well today that may, but honestly, though, the way that this is portrayed, from a queer cinema perspective, the normalcy that this is how this is portrayed, and I would again, one of those things that it should be championed as is you presenting it to anyone and being able to like just accept it as a given, like I said, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
That's Funeral Parade of Roses, 1969, Toshio Matsumoto. Go find it, or give me a call and I'll let you borrow my Blu-ray. It's cool.
or we'll just talk to you. We'll just give you kind of a punch by punch like we did here. Yeah. Matsumoto passed away in 2017. I have not seen his other movies, but I definitely am going to try to check out Demons soon. Yeah. That's supposed to be as good, if not better than this. Obviously I don't, but yeah, I mean, so, and he was pretty prolific. He did a ton of shorts. But this was his first feature length film.
The shorts are on there's some shorts on the Blu-ray as well. I just got it recently. So I've had time to watch the movie. I'll say twice, more like 1 3/4, but I've watched it twice too, but have not yet dug into the shorts, which I'm looking forward to as well. So
it's one of those things. I know we need to move on to the next film, but like, I just like how I keep going back to the beauty of it all and how how beautiful Eddie is in the film, and how like it's just there's a scene where he's goading his lover about his muscles and whether he can pick up a chair with one hand, and it's just it's just so much fun. Like, it's just so like I don't know. It's so like that's what I love about this movie is I keep going back. Like, when I watch it again, there's things that I remember or things that I've forgotten that I pick back up on that are just like so silly and so human and so much fun. And then again, but it's also presented in this completely bizarre packaging, and bizarre in the best way.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The best kind of bizarre.
All right.
The movie I asked you to watch was Athena. So
yes. So directed by Romain Gavras. And I had previously seen the one right before this, The World Is Yours, which is kind of his Scarface. Vincent
Cassel. Yeah.
And I liked that one. I didn't love it. I liked it. So let me set the stage, and I'm gonna have to pull some of these names. So so this is a French film. It's set in a slum called a slum, and I don't know exactly where it is in France, but it's a slum called Athena. We are immediately thrust into action in this movie. The camera never stops, but essentially the story is kind of a Greek tragedy of 4 brothers. One is named Adir. He's the youngest, he had been murdered, what we believe, by police. That sets off this riot between the slum and the slum of Athena and the police state and the police in France. Adir is Muslim, obviously, and there's a lot of Muslim tension and immigrant tension in France, so this speaks directly to that. Adir has 3 other brothers. One of them is named Abdel, who he was a soldier who had just come back from the war. He has a brother named Karim, who is living still in the slums and is kind of the leader of an uprising to avenge Adir and get justice for Adir. And then we have Mokhtar, who is the oldest of the brothers, who's a drug dealer who didn't really know Adir and is really only concerned about how the uprising is going to affect, his drug trade. The movie starts off with Adir being killed, or has been killed, and Abdel is in the police station, demanding justice. He's a soldier, but he's being respectful, but he's demanding answers and justice for Adir. So he wants basically the police to turn over who's killed him. Kareem is much more hot-headed. He throws a Molotov cocktail into the police, and basically chaos ensues. Kareem jumps back into a van, and for the next 4 kilometers, they drive back into Athena, and then just essentially you're watching the raid for the most part. Kareem is able to keep the police at bay and is starting to build up his own army. They're there to basically break into the police station and to steal guns, because obviously no one in the slum has guns. They basically fight the cops with fireworks, which is visually ridiculously impressive. Mm-hmm. But obviously very tactically not really all that useful. So they are able to rob the police station. They head back to Athena to barricade themselves. And Abdel, during this whole time frame, is trying to reason with Kareem and to help out Athena by evacuating people out of the slum. As the police are coming and they're obviously going to invade, he wants to get his family and any innocent lives into safety. So there's a struggle there, and obviously Mokhtar, they stumble across him, but again he is just trying to escape Athena with his drugs and with his guns. Kareem doesn't want him to leave because he has guns. So there's an inner fight between these three brothers. As this all escalates, we come to know the story of Jerome, who is a young police officer who has young children and basically does not want to be invading the slums of Athena. He gets taken hostage by Kareem, and in order to be used as leverage, so the police will tell them or turn over the people who have killed Adir. At one point, Abdel finds Jerome and tries to break him out. That leads to a struggle with him and Kareem. Kareem tries to blackmail Abdel to let Jerome go, and he holds a mocktail cocktail, and he's outside of these gates when Mokhtar, I guess it's a little convoluted at this point. Mokhtar has called police, so he has corrupt police on his payroll, cops, or at least with his friends, and he's trying to get out of Athena. So he calls the corrupt police to help break him out. The corrupt police come, they see Kareem with the Molotov cocktail, they shoot Kareem. He drops the firebomb and it engulfs Kareem, killing Kareem, in addition to Adir, who's already been killed. At that point, Abdel reevaluates his hostage situation with Jerome and decides to hold him hostage to get justice. He understands what happens with how Mokhtar was involved with Kareem's death, so he ends up killing him by essentially beating him to death. And then at a certain point, Abdel, because he's a soldier, realizes that he's outnumbered, that his people are in danger. He eventually lets Jerome go. All this while, anarchists, people who have been taking advantage of the situation, who are living in the slums, have set up bombs in the slums, essentially, basically using propane tanks to blow up the slums once the cops come in. Abdel resigns himself to letting Jerome go, making sure everyone escapes Athena, and the bombs go off and Abdel dies in a bomb explosion. We later come to find out. So while Abdel is talking to the police, trying to get justice for Adir and trying to figure out who's killed him, the police tell them that it was a fascist right-wing group that was impersonating the police that killed Adir. As we fade to black and the credits roll, we do find out that Adir actually was killed by a religious group that had taken advantage again of or inserted themselves into and tried to exacerbate the tension with the Muslims. They appear to be some sort of right-wing Christian group who's taken on the police uniforms and beaten Adir to death and then burned their police uniforms. Just kind of, and basically all of this is just really kind of a snapshot into how all of these things can potentially go. The racial tension between, the class system of the poor, versus the establishment, as well as bad acting groups that take advantage of these situations and manipulate and exploit already exploited people in situations like these. Now, this movie is probably told over a period of 6 to 8 hours at most, aside from Adir's killing. So you go right from the police station directly back into Athena, and you're essentially, not to diminish or to categorize this incorrectly, but you feel like you're kind of in a first person shooter. The film is, you're always following one person. You're either following Abdel, you're following Kareem, you're following Mokhtar, or you're following Jerome in a very mostly centralized shot of them. You do get some bigger pan out shots, some very well choreographed and really beautifully shot scenes of the group firing fireworks, or the police creating a kind of a bunker in amongst themselves and their riot shields. But this movie is nonstop from jump. Like from the opening frame, you are in it. Like I said, the Molotov cocktail is dropped immediately, and then you're headed straight back to Athena, and you're basically running through hallways the entire time. You're moving. The camera is constantly moving, and like I said, you're moving from one person to the next. It is a thrilling and exhausting, and especially because it's in French, right? So you're also reading, and it's not like overly difficult to watch, but you are reading subtitles while you're watching all of this kinetic energy. I mean, the filmmaking feat alone, which so this is on Netflix. There is a making of Athena featurette after the movie's over. It's also available on Netflix. And just the feat of watching them make this movie was exhausting. And it's just incredible that it was able to be pulled off. And all of these kind of, young, no-name actors and men and women that are just brilliant and convey the correct emotions and do so seemingly thanklessly, because they're getting passed by in camera movements and when will never be really fully recognized for the role that they, the contribution they had in this movie. It's a nonstop thrill ride is not really where I would go as far as but it is a nonstop thrill ride.
But that opening shot is like a 4-minute long single take shot. And I mean, and the whole movie is like just a kind of sequence of long takes. I mean, he's like long, like single takes, but that first one is so intense because we follow Abdel out, to the start of the press conference where he's walking through the police station through people, and then the camera just keeps going and keeps going, and I don't know. See, I didn't watch the making of, but I don't know if it's a kind of drone or how they go in the van as it's like flying down the street, and then
there are cameramen handing cameras off to people. So there's
have to watch
running. Like if you watch, you're like, holy shit, this is the most dangerous film I've ever seen made, because like the people hanging off the van are hanging off and then so there's another car with a camera or a motorcycle with a camera that comes in and hands the camera off through the back of the van and then starts to film inside of it.
It's amazing.
It's bonkers. And what's so brilliant about that technique is that I think had this movie slowed down, I think a lot of the points it was trying to make would have been too drawn out and too specific.
Heavy-handed.
I think we've seen, right, and heavy-handed, because I think we've seen that in movies we've watched this year where, look, I'm all for social progression, but these movies that are trying, and again, and this idea of go woke, go broke is horseshit, but this idea of like, you can present your message incorrectly. And so something like The Wonder, who has this believe women story, does it so heavy-handedly that you roll your eyes and it betrays the message that you're trying to get across. This never gives you a second to even consider that to be a possibility. It never lets up. You never have a chance to catch your breath. And to that end, the movie then presents all of this and allows you to think about it afterwards, because again, it's too much to process while you're processing all the action around you.
Right. Well, this movie, I think more than probably anything that we've really seen this year, it does that thing of form and content working so well together. Right. The way this film is structured, the way it's shot, you get a chance to sort of see and feel that anger as it's building. If it were shot a different way, we'd have too much time to sit and stew. We'd have too much time to sort of pick things apart.
Tell you about it, right? I mean, we only get that they're Christian fascists because, I mean, I may be using the word fascist wrong, but they're a Christian right wing, group that murdered a deer because you see a passing tattoo on the back of a man's. I mean, it's not passing; it's pretty obvious. So they're trying to get across, but it's not. But again, that's at the end of the movie and again, it cuts. You see police uniforms burning, and you cut to black.
Yeah, because the point is, like, it doesn't really matter who it was. I mean, they think that it was cops that killed these guys because of like a social media video, and you see these. You see these perpetrators in police uniforms, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, what matters is that stuff keeps happening, right? What matters is the police are not finding these people. That's what matters, right? So I mean, yes, we see this at the end, and of course, it's just like the stuff that happens, here. These right-wing, neo-Nazi, fascist, ultra-violent, whatever, they perpetrate similar actions. But again, to this community, it doesn't matter necessarily who it was. It matters that it keeps happening and that the people that are supposed to find these people aren't finding them. And they don't want to hear the excuses anymore. And that's the other thing, is that this rage has been so pent up. That's why they set everything on fire. There's nowhere else for this rage to go. I mean, this Athena could be Detroit, could be Watts, could be Ferguson. It's that same kind of idea.
Right. And they're blowing up. I mean, and again, so you will about Sebastian, the one who sets all the bombs, but they're blowing up their own homes. And you also get a very quick slice of life where it's the family members that, the Muslim family members that have the prayer session for a deer, that in the middle of all of this chaos, they're still holding true to who they are and to their traditions. And the mom really only wants Abdel to find Kareem to help corral him in because he's, she thinks he's weak-minded. So you also see the idea of this older guard that understands the situation and really just wants to get by and wants to survive and wants their family to face no more tragedy than what they've already faced. And that struggle. And I think that, the whole having these young boys who have all of this aggression and testosterone and pent up, anger that goes nowhere. I really, really love the idea of them using Roman candles that have no effect whatsoever, other than to provide a really, really cool visual, which probably is why they did it in the first place, right? I mean, it's just a matter of it's all they have, right? They really are toothless, and so to that extent, but they still have to push it out somewhere, right?
Right. There was some pushback, I think, to this film. I mean, this film played well at Venice and the Berlinale. I think there was some pushback in the press. I think, as you can imagine, more right-wing leaning press, who are going to say things. Well, this is just like, stylized violence, and this isn't the way to solve anything. I mean, those messages that you get from people that say, like, well, look, I support your right to protest, but I think you should protest in a different way, right? These people that don't understand like why this community is willing to set itself on fire,
right? And I think it does. Yes, it definitely has a message that it's trying to send here, but I also think that it shows. I don't know. Does it show an even-handed side of all of it? I think it shows, where, because again, ultimately, it wasn't the police that killed a deer, and so a lot of it was misplaced. You also see the groups that try to subvert the message and try to further exploit the exploited. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. And in addition to just being a fucking badass action film, like it's
right.
I mean, that alone, because again, this is not like, yes, you see a very brief prayer circle, but yes, you understand that these are Muslim men, but that in reality, the prayer circle is not presented because they're all standing up. It's not necessarily a distinct Muslim prayer circle. So this is not none of these messages are in your face. They're not, like I said, they're not the wonder. They're not trying to tell you how you should think about something or how you should feel. They're just presenting what we don't typically get to see, which is the violence on the inside of all of these efforts, and the frustration and the fear and the resolution to hold on to anything when you have nothing.
Yeah. And again, like, I think this film, or at least the community portrayed in the film, is saying to the cops, it doesn't matter if it wasn't you. Right? Quit telling us that you're going to protect us when clearly you're not. And that's the same. That's the same message that protests have here, right? It's the same message. Like, quit telling us you're the good guys when clearly you are not making yourselves look good when these things continue to happen. And there's a reason that this group that killed a deer chose your uniforms to put on. I mean, a deer doesn't have to be Muslim. It can be black. Right. He can be, here, he could be Hispanic, he could be Latinx. It doesn't matter. These right-wing groups, cops, they're not killing white kids, right? And I think that's something that the movie is showing. And that's why people are so upset. So yes, the police, and even the police officer that Abdel knows, he tells him, like, look, it wasn't us. We're trying to find it. But you want to look at this guy and go, all of your effort is over here, breaking into this place, breaking into Athena. Where's the effort to find these other people? So saying one thing, showing something else. I mean, again, another reason this community gets so upset. And I think kudos to the filmmaker for just showing that anger, right? Again, and not over explaining, not doing the wonder thing of like binary opposites, because really there's only one side here. I mean, right. And I think it's to the film's credit.
Yeah. Like I said, I would see. I'm interested to see what he does next. I'm interested to see if someone snaps him up to do something bigger budget and more Hollywood, and not obviously as I don't think his next film, if he does it outside of France, is going to be as message centric, but I don't. Sure. The World Is Yours wasn't necessarily message centric either. So I mean, he obviously has it in it, but I mean, these action sequences are so well done that it almost overpowers what he's trying to get accomplished in the film. But like, I think it plays so well together. It is a fast-paced 97 minutes. I highly recommend it.
It is great. Yeah, it is bravura filmmaking. Do you want to tell listeners what we have coming up next?
Yeah, so we just got done filming Terry Gilliam's Brazil at the Fort Worth Film Club. That happened last night. So we are going to be talking about his films, specifically Brazil, but everything else in his catalog coming up. Brothers Grimm. We're going to be deep diving in a 3-episode arc on just the Brothers Grimm. So we'll be talking about his work. It won't be a full-on Schrader series, but it will be a discussion of Brazil and kind of the movies surrounding that. Most likely the ones of his, what we calls the trilogy of imagination. And that'll be our next episode. Where we go after that is still kind of up in the air. We're going to hit another director. We may do heist movies. So we're kind of playing around with a few ideas. If you want to see something, if you have something you think we should talk about, hit us up at whydoeswilhelmscream.com. We're always open to your ideas. We don't necessarily promise to do any of them, but we're always open to them.
We'll listen.
Right. If you are in the Fort Worth area in January, a couple of things we got going on that are really, really exciting. For the Fort Worth Film Club, on January 18th, we're doing a Texas filmmakers showcase. We're showing short films from all around Texas. Some of them played at the Lone Star Film Festival. We're going to have a recorded Q&A with the filmmakers that can't be there, the ones that are based out of Austin. And then we'll have an actual Q&A with the filmmakers in person after the screening. So I'm very, very excited to see that, to do that. I haven't seen the films yet. Hopefully I'm going to see them this week. So But if you're there, we would really love, if you're in Fort Worth, we really love you to come out, because we want to show a nice big crowd for these local filmmakers and really show them support. I think it would go a long way to help supporting what we do. And then 3 days after that, we're having the Real House Foundation Mystery Movie Minithon 6, which is our big annual fundraiser, also at the Stage West Theater. That's going to be 2 movies, food, auctions, raffles, all kinds of cool shit, especially if you're in the area. Tickets are $35, and you can find those out at, you can find out more about that at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Hopefully, we're looking for this to be our biggest event yet. So we're looking for a lot of people. Hopefully we're going to get 100 people out to watch these movies and to enjoy them with us and just have a real good night to support a cause that is near and dear to my heart, which is providing that cinematic experience to at-risk and underprivileged kids. And outside of that, man, I'm this has been, I know we haven't done it for very long, but I'm glad we're doing this. And for everyone who's listened, I'm really thankful that you're listening. If you do want to interact with us, please do so. If you're listening and you're at the Fort Worth Film Club, come tell us whether you like the podcast or not. Well, actually, don't tell us if you don't like it. That's cool too. But keep that on the DL.
Tell us why you like it, and maybe I'll be sad less often.
Right.
Probably not, but maybe. We would love to hear from you. We are very thankful as we come to the end of this year and into the new year. Very thankful for all the listeners. And yeah, any feedback is always appreciated, as long as it's couched in loving
and love.
Compliments.
Just very, very gentle love. Look, we are lower middle-aged cis white men. The fragility is fucking real.
It's off the charts.
The fragility is real. We try to be as progressive as we possibly can, but there's only this is just how we were raised, and so. So
I gotta tell you,
be gentle with us.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, when I quit drinking and smoking cigarettes, man, there were way too many feelings, and I'm still dealing with all of those feelings. So.
There's only so many vices, man. I mean, and most of them are bad for you. So the best vice is to watch movies, and sometimes that's not even good, because we grew up on John Hughes films, and that warped our sense of high school. And
we had to sort of relearn a lot of things. Speaking of trying to be progressive,
absolutely. For the longest time, I just thought sex happened. I mean, I thought, it just was a thing that just, you just got to get a man and a woman close together, and that was what sex was.
And that's how you get grandkids.
Which is why Brock and I are recording separately tonight.
Okay, I think we should end it there.
Absolutely. All right, until 2023.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, keep screaming.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you like today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time,